History is written by those who survived to tell it. But what if the survivors had never survived? What if, on one August morning in 479 BC, the world had tilted in a different direction? This is the story of a battle that saved civilization itself. Not the civilization of kings and emperors, but the civilization of citizens, of debate, of freedom. This is Plataea. To understand Plataea, you have to understand that by 479 BC, the Greeks had already lost. Twice, they had been invaded, burned, humiliated. They were exhausted. The Persian Empire was the superpower of the ancient world. Under Darius the Great, and then his son Xerxes, it had conquered everything in its path. 50 million people, 23 different nations, an empire so vast that the sun never set on its borders. The Persians didn't see themselves as conquerors. They saw themselves as liberators. They believed they were bringing order to a chaotic world. And in many ways, they were more tolerant than the Greeks. They allowed local religions, local customs. But there was one thing they demanded: submission, submission. That single word was about to collide with another. Freedom. It began not in Greece, but across the Aegean. The Greek cities of Ionia, on the coast of what is now Turkey, had been under Persian rule for decades. They were wealthy, they were cultured, but they were not free. The Ionian Greeks sent ambassadors to mainland Greece begging for help. Most city-states refused, but Athens sent 20 ships. Just 20. It was a token gesture, but it was enough. In 498 BC, the Ionians and their Athenian allies marched on Sardis and burned it to the ground. When news reached Darius in Persepolis, he was dining. He stood up, drew his bow, and shot an arrow into the sky. Zeus, grant me vengeance upon the Athenians. He ordered a servant to whisper to him 3 times every day before dinner, Master, remember the Athenians. 10 years later, Darius sent an armada, 600 ships, 25,000 soldiers. They landed at Marathon, just 26 miles from Athens. The Athenians had a choice. They could hide behind their walls and hope the Persians would leave, or they could march out and face an army twice their size. They chose to march. 10,000 Athenians, 1,000 Plataeans, their only allies. They lined up on the hills above the beach and waited. For days, they waited. The Persians waited too. Both sides were afraid to move first. The genius of Marathon was the general, Leonidas. He realized the Persians were about to leave. They were loading their cavalry back onto the ships. That was the moment. Without cavalry, the Persian line was vulnerable. At dawn, the Greeks did something insane. They charged. Not a slow march, but a full sprint. 1 mile, in full armor. The Persians, shocked by the sight of 10,000 men running at them, loosed their arrows. But the Greeks didn't stop. Close the line. Shield to shield, push. The Greek phalanx hit the Persian center like a hammer. Bronze against wicker, discipline against chaos. When the dust settled, 6,000 Persians lay dead. The Athenians lost fewer than 200. Marathon was more than a victory. It was proof that the Persian army could be beaten. Proof that free men, fighting for their homes, were worth 10 slaves fighting for a king. But Darius was not finished. He began to gather the largest invasion force the world had ever seen. But in 486 BC, before he could sail, he died. His son, Xerxes, inherited the crown. And the obsession: Xerxes was not his father. Darius had been a builder. Xerxes was an avenger. For years, he prepared. He built a bridge across the Hellespont, 2 miles long. He dug a canal through a peninsula to move his fleet. He assembled soldiers from every corner of the empire. Herodotus says Xerxes had over 2 million men. Modern historians think it was closer to 200,000 to 300,000. Even at the lower estimate, this was the largest military force ever assembled in the ancient world. The Greeks knew they couldn't stop Xerxes in open battle, so they chose a place where numbers didn't matter. A narrow pass between the mountains and the sea, Thermopylae, the hot gates. King Leonidas of Sparta took 300 full Spartan citizens and about 7,000 allies to hold the pass. They weren't supposed to die there. They were supposed to delay the Persians until the main Greek army could mobilize. For 2 days, the Persians attacked. Wave after wave broke against the Spartan shields. Xerxes sent in his Immortals, his elite guard. They fared no better. The pass was so narrow that only a few dozen men could fight at a time. And in close combat, no one was better than a Spartan. Spartans, eat well tonight, for tomorrow we dine in Hades. But on the third day, betrayal. A local Greek showed the Persians a mountain path around the pass. At dawn, Leonidas realized he was surrounded. He dismissed most of his allies, but the 300 Spartans stayed, not because they were suicidal, but because Spartan law forbade retreat. They fought with spears until the spears broke, then swords, then bare hands and teeth. When it was over, Xerxes ordered Leonidas' body beheaded and crucified. A final insult, but the insult revealed the truth. Xerxes was afraid of what 300 men had shown the world. With the pass open, the Persian army flooded into central Greece. The Greek fleet, though victorious at Artemisium, retreated, and Athens made the hardest decision in its history. The Mysticals convinced the Athenians to abandon their city. Every man, woman, and child was evacuated to the island of Salamis and the Peloponnese. They left behind their homes, their temples, everything. It was an act of collective faith. When Xerxes entered Athens, he found a ghost town. In rage, he ordered it burned. The Acropolis, the temples, the homes, everything reduced to ash and rubble. Xerxes thought he was erasing Athens, but he was creating martyrs. Every Greek who saw that smoke rising knew what they were fighting for. This wasn't about land. It was about existence. The Persian fleet was massive, over 1,000 ships, according to Herodotus. The Greek fleet numbered less than 400. On paper, it wasn't a contest, but the Mysticals had a plan. The Mysticals understood psychology. He sent a slave to Xerxes with a secret message. The Greeks are planning to escape tonight. If you block the exits, you can trap them. It was a lie, but Xerxes believed it. Xerxes ordered his fleet to enter the narrow straits at dawn. It was exactly what the Mysticals wanted. In the open sea, Persian numbers would have won, but in the narrows, the Persian ships couldn't maneuver. They rammed into each other. The Greeks, smaller and more agile, picked them apart. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on the shore. He watched as his fleet was destroyed. He watched as his dreams of conquest drowned in the wine-dark sea. Salamis was the turning point. After Salamis, Xerxes knew he couldn't supply his army through the sea. He had to retreat, but he didn't retreat completely. He left behind his best general and his best troops. The war was far from over. Mardonius was not like Xerxes. He was subtle. Where Xerxes used force, Mardonius used words. He spent the winter in Thessaly, not preparing for battle, but preparing for negotiation. Mardonius understood Greek politics. He knew the alliance was fragile. He knew Athens and Sparta distrusted each other. So he made Athens an offer they couldn't refuse: gold, territory, and the restoration of their city. All they had to do was switch sides. The offer was tempting. Athens was in ruins. Its people were refugees. Its treasury was empty. The Persian gold could rebuild everything. And yet, how can we bow to the men who burned our temples? How can we surrender the freedom our fathers died to protect? Tell Mardonius this: as long as the sun rises in the east, Athens will never submit to Persia. But the rejection came with a warning to Sparta. Athens essentially said, march with us, or we'll find a new ally. And if we ally with Persia, your precious wall at the isthmus won't save you. It was a brilliant piece of diplomatic blackmail. In Sparta, the elders debated. It was the Carnea, a sacred festival in honor of Apollo. To march to war during the Carnea was to risk divine wrath. They had used the same excuse to arrive late at Marathon. But this time, the stakes were different. Pausanias, the regent of Sparta, understood the strategic reality. If Athens fell, the Persian fleet could simply sail around the Spartan wall and land in the Peloponnese. The wall was useless without a fleet to protect it. And without Athens, there was no fleet. In the dead of night, in total secrecy, Sparta mobilized. 5,000 full citizens, 35,000 helots, their enslaved laborers, now armed for war. 5,000 perioikoi, the free but non-citizen residents of Sparta. 45,000 men. This was the largest army Sparta had ever fielded. They weren't sending a contingent. They were sending the state. This decision reveals something crucial about Spartan society. For all their militarism, they were pragmatic. They bent their religious rules when survival demanded it. The myth of the inflexible Spartan is just that, a myth. When Mardonius heard that Sparta had marched, he knew diplomacy had failed. He burned Athens one last time, a final insult, and retreated north to Boeotia. The choice of ground was deliberate. Mardonius needed flat, open terrain. His most effective weapon was his cavalry, and cavalry needs space. The plain of Boeotia was perfect. He also chose a position near the city of Plataea and the Asopus River. The river protected his front, and he built a massive fortified camp behind his lines, wooden walls, 10 feet high, towers at regular intervals, grain stores that could feed 300,000 men for months. Mardonius wasn't preparing for a quick battle. He was preparing for a siege, a war of attrition, because he knew the Greeks' greatest weakness: they couldn't stay united. The Greek force that gathered near Plataea was the largest coalition army in Greek history. Sparta brought 45,000. Athens brought 8,000 hoplites and 800 archers. From Corinth, Megara, Tegea, and dozens of smaller city-states, another 57,000. In total, perhaps 110,000 men. This was unprecedented. Greeks didn't trust each other. City-states that had been at war a decade earlier were now fighting side by side. It was a miracle of diplomacy, but it was also fragile. Pausanias, as the Spartan regent, commanded the entire force. He was young, barely 30, and inexperienced at this scale, but he had the weight of Sparta behind him. And everyone knew, if Sparta withdrew, the alliance would collapse. For 11 days, the two armies stared at each other across the Asopus River. The Greeks held the foothills of Mount Citaron. The Persians held the plain. Neither side would attack. The Greeks couldn't cross the river into the Persian cavalry. The Persians couldn't charge uphill into the Greek phalanx. So Mardonius changed tactics. He unleashed his cavalry in constant raids. They couldn't break the phalanx, but they didn't need to. They just needed to wear the Greeks down. Thousands of arrows rained down on the Greek lines every hour. Men fell, morale crumbled. But the real problem wasn't the arrows. It was the water. The Greeks were dependent on a single spring, the Gargaphia, for water. On the 10th day, Persian cavalry found it and fouled it with bodies and debris. Suddenly, 110,000 men had no water. Pausanias called a council of war. The situation was impossible. No water, dwindling food. The army was starting to fracture. Some city-states were talking about going home. Pausanias made a desperate decision: retreat. But not a rout, a tactical withdrawal to a new position closer to Plataea, where there was water. It was supposed to happen at night, in 3 stages. The center would move first, the wings would cover them, then everyone would regroup at dawn. On paper, it was sound. In practice, it was a disaster. The Greek center, composed of various city-states, misunderstood the orders. Instead of moving to the rally point, they marched all the way back to Plataea, miles out of position. The Athenians on the left wing moved correctly, but found themselves. Whether Mycale happened on the same day is debatable, but the symbolism was perfect. On land and at sea, in Europe and in Asia, the Greeks had won. The war was over. In the years after Plataea, Athens transformed, using the silver from its mines and the tribute from its new allies in the Delian League. It rebuilt, and it didn't just rebuild, it transcended. The Parthenon was built on the ruins the Persians left behind. It was a statement: you tried to destroy us, you failed, and now we're building something more beautiful than you could ever imagine. Athens became the cultural center of the world. Playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides, philosophers like Socrates and Plato, historians like Herodotus and Thucydides. Democracy flourished, art flourished, human thought flourished. We have to be careful not to romanticize. Athenian democracy was limited. Women couldn't vote. Slaves had no rights. But for the first time in human history, a large group of male citizens had a direct say in their government. It was revolutionary. But while Athens built temples and theaters, Sparta remained Sparta. Militarized, closed, fearful of change, Sparta won the Persian Wars. But in some ways, It lost the peace. While Athens evolved, Sparta stagnated. 50 years later, the two would fight each other in the Peloponnesian War. And that war would devastate Greece more thoroughly than Persia ever did. Plataea was the high point of Greek unity. It would never be reached again. The Persian Wars didn't end Persian power. Persia remained a superpower for another 150 years, until a young Macedonian named Alexander crossed the Hellespont with 40,000 men. But Persia never again tried to conquer Greece. The memory of Plataea, of the bronze wall that would not break, was too strong. Plataea is the forgotten battle. Everyone knows Thermopylae. Everyone knows Marathon. But Plataea was the decisive engagement. It was the battle that actually ended the war. So why does Plataea matter? Why does a battle fought 2,500 years ago still echo? Because it was the hinge moment. If the Persians had won at Plataea, Athens would have been absorbed into the Persian Empire. There would be no Parthenon, no Socrates, no Plato. The entire trajectory of Western philosophy, art, politics, and science would be different. We can't say the Persians were evil or the Greeks were good. History is more complicated than that. But we can say this: the Greek model of citizen participation, of debate, of individual freedom,